point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We're into another segment of a special segment of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Fennell. And I'm George Harvey, this is Tom Fennell, and we have Thomas Fricke, who is our guest, who lives in Brattleboro and in Indonesia.
In Bali, yes.
In Bali,
it's
okay.
The Brattleboro to Bali axis.
Okay, and I met with Thomas at Mocha Joe's day before yesterday, is that right? And we had one of the most fascinating conversations I have had in recent times, because Thomas has been working with renewable power, you know, saving the world for decades.
1 megajoule at a time.
1 megajoule at a time. Now, if you wonder what a megajoule is,
forget it.
I told Thomas I can deal with euros and pounds. I can deal with kilograms.
How about slugs?
Slugs? Do you mean slugs as opposed to?
It's a unit.
A
unit of mass, I believe.
Well, there's a unit of
Right.
type size.
Huh?
There's a type size. There's a lead and a slug, and the difference is the thickness.
Oh yeah.
If it's 6 points or bigger, it's a slug. But if it's less than 6 points, it's a
Somehow I've forgotten
lead.
about it, but it goes along with newtons and dynes.
Yeah,
and
I know.
like that.
It's bizarre. You know,
Those things.
a joule. Well, that's the amount of energy that it takes. The amount of energy that you can collect if you gather the footfall of an ant. You know, something like that.
That's one way to
And a megajoule is a million amps.
That's right. But we should be talking about things that people can get. And you were talking about the German military prolonging the war.
Well, this is a little apocryphal tale, but and I happen to be of German and Jewish ancestry. So the German military was able to prolong the war by basically converting all their vehicles, their panzers, their trucks, etc., even their artillery, to producer gas by burning whatever they could collect.
Which, in some cases, by putting something that looked like an ash can on the back bumper of a car, you could burn wood and drive on wood power.
Yeah, and fortunately, they didn't make it all the way to nuclear.
Yeah, fortunately. Nevertheless, you've been doing some amazing stuff, and one of the things that I mentioned to Tom here before the show started was that you had told me something that I didn't know, which is that a peat bog can take out of the atmosphere about 12 times, 15 times as much carbon dioxide per year as a forest of the same size.
At least. Basically, this is a 2 or 3 ventures ago of mine. I'm an ecopreneur.
Ecopreneur, okay.
Inveterate serial ecopreneur. One of my first ventures was unfortunately too early to capture all the momentum and support that global warming, climate change issues have gotten, which is I was producing a substance called eco-peat, which is basically a substitute for peat moss. Now, peat moss is basically strip mined from peat bogs,
right,
and wetlands, essentially. And about 4.5% of the world's surface area is peat bogs or peat-like fens and bogs. And it sequesters about 27% of the carbon.
That's an amazing figure. That just says those bogs are so special. Let's build some more.
So they have, for millennia, have stored all this incredible decaying organic matter and carbon as a result. One peat bog can, if you drain it and open it, can release close to 5,000 tons of carbon. And as a vis-a-vis versus a forest, a tropical climax ecosystem possibly at the nature of about 200, 300 tons of carbon are locked in. So preserving peat bogs and preserving wetlands is probably one of the key, real solutions in the world these days. And actually, we're involved in several projects involving this type of work, preserving and protecting ecosystems, but also making them productive so they can produce food and energy and fiber and other key products.
Right.
So you can retain a peat bog and still produce.
Yeah, there's actually a very arcane, you were talking about, I think, well, let me throw it out, polludiculture. Probably you've never heard of it. I only heard about it about 3 weeks ago, but I've been practicing it. It's basically producing food and energy in peat bogs and in wetlands. And we're involved in a project, the far end of Indonesia in Papua, which is about as far as it goes, by producing sagu, which is one of the world's premier gluten-free flour substitutes, also relatively unknown, but can produce up to 20 to 30 tons per hectare on a sustained yield basis.
Okay.
Through what's called polludiculture.
Polludiculture.
Yes.
So what would this stuff be? Something like potatoes or something like radishes?
It's actually, they're trees. So
They're trees.
One trunk can feed a village for a week.
Wow.
Yeah. And
so the tree is the fiber that you can eat.
The tree contains about 50% fiber and 50% starch.
Oh,
My goodness
interesting.
gracious.
And the fiber can be turned into glucose. It can be turned into biochar and biomass, and biogas for that matter.
Yeah.
So it's quite a remarkable treasure that has been relatively unknown except to indigenous peoples in the remote reaches of the Indonesian archipelago.
There's probably a lot of stuff out there like that we know nothing about.
And it's basically part of their staple, and their whole cultural identity is locked up in these type of products.
Wow. Now this is the western half of the...
Far east of Indonesia.
But it's the western half of the island of New Guinea?
Yeah, it's occupied by Indonesia. If this is not being watched by the Indonesians.
Yes, right. There is some discussion that might happen about who actually owns that piece of property.
Well, actually, with due credit to Indonesia, there have been some remarkable transformations. It is actually now the third largest democracy in the world. Okay. After the U.S. and India. Okay. Arguably, those democracies, but
but Indonesia certainly is a democracy.
It is a very extremely energetic, and it's actually social media plays the major role in deciding, making decisions, and selecting leaders these days. So
interesting.
It's quite exciting.
Now you had told me, if we can skip to a separate subject here, you had told me a story. A true story about tobacco and palm oil, and how tobacco farmers were no longer allowed to use kerosene, and this led to one thing and to another and to another. And you got into this.
Two wrongs make a right, you know.
Okay, it happens sometimes.
If you want to use that term. Arguably two of the most controversial and criticized commodities, tobacco and palm oil. How do we, combine those two to save the world, if you will, if you use that overused term? The island of Lombok, which is next to our island of Bali, produces 80% of the tobacco that goes into the export grade, Marlboro-like cigarettes. And about 6 years ago, the government wised up to the fact that they were burning a big hole in the treasury by subsidizing kerosene to the tune of 3 to 1. And when they pulled the kerosene subsidy, thousands of villages and thousands of tobacco farmers were up in arms because that was their fuel of choice for curing and, drying their tobacco. So my company leaped into the fray, working with a coalition of environmental organizations and even big tobacco, believe it or not.
This is very believable to me.
Well, big tobacco already has, significant, shall we say, health downsides, to say the least. And so they decided they need to be on the right side of environmental and social issues.
Right.
And therefore, they are probably among the biggest backers of sustainability in the world these days. They have commitments. We're talking about Philip Morris and British American Tobacco and other companies have decided by the year 2017 there will be no more, or there will be only sustainable fuel for their operations.
Is this worldwide?
This worldwide, yeah.
Amazing.
And we are on a pilot. We're piloting it in one island that has one massive volcano, and was essentially in jeopardy of losing its forests and its watersheds and its soils. So we're able to work with farmers and work with the palm oil industry to supply alternative biomass, deliver it essentially to the doorsteps, to the kilns of 18,000 farmers.
Now, you told me that when the kerosene was cut off, they went to coal.
Yeah, the immediate, they leaped into coal, which turned out to be a disaster, fortunately, I'd say, in the sense that it was roundly rejected because it was so polluting and contaminating of their rice paddies and their households, as well as due to the corruption in the supply chain. By the time the farmer got the bag of coal, it was mainly dust. So
this is actual physical corruption.
Physical, yeah.
Degradation.
Well, yeah, just a whole series of exploitive intermediaries that degraded the product. By the time it got to the end, it was useless, practically useless. So as a result, it opened up a wedge for both fuel wood and biomass alternatives. But unfortunately, fuel wood, the first thing was just to cut down just about every tree in sight in the lowlands, and then to begin to assault the highlands and the watersheds. And so we, working with this ungodly alliance, were able to get farmers to cooperate to convert their kilns to biomass. And we're now bringing in boatloads, massive boatloads, 5,000-ton boatloads of palm kernel shells, which are one of the waste byproducts of the palm industry.
Now, what would normally happen to the palm kernel shells?
About half of them are used to fire boilers and power plants, so that the actual palm oil processing mill is self-sufficient in energy.
Okay.
So they're using them within their own energy.
Yeah, they're basically self-sufficient, but then they have a surplus.
Yeah.
And that typically gets tossed or
it goes into the river.
It goes into the river or paving roads in remote areas. And we were able to intercept this and move it over about 2,000 kilometers in large boats, and then distribute it to thousands of farmers.
Now, you say that there were other parts of the palm that were also used.
Well, okay, Indonesia is the #1 in the world in palm, #3 in carbon emissions, partly as a result of a lot of conversion of forests and peatlands. That's actually what, not so much their industrial pollution, but actually their destruction of their carbon stocks. And that leapfrogged them from number 42 to number 3 in the world. in
This is
carbon
not
emissions.
not a small population, though. Indonesia has a big
It's-
population.
It's, you know, they're creeping up on US of A. They're about 300 million.
Wow.
Wow.
So, so palm and conversion for pulp and paper. Much of the paper that I think people are using here in the U.S. are actually from former forests and peatlands in Indonesia.
I wouldn't have thought that.
Oh yeah, and so basically, what we're able to do is harness a lot of the waste from this industry, which is there's massive amount of waste, and also remarkable way to kind of change the paradigm and to redirect all this misplaced waste. Of course, is a resource out of place.
We're seeing this all over the world. Every place you see a biomass, a biodigester going in, you're talking about something that 30 years ago, 40 years ago would have been thrown away at expense, destructively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So palm, we're talking about production of 30 million tons of oil and 250 million tons of fruit every year. And out of that, there is 200 million tons of biomass waste. That
200 million tons.
Okay. Therefore, a large, reservoir.
Right.
That can be converted in a solid, liquid, and gaseous state into various types of power, and including tobacco kilns. But the actual reality is we're shifting from tobacco to tofu and tempeh factories and lime kilns. We're basically building on what is, a significant kind of success into something that encompasses the rest of the industries and helps create a lot of jobs and income in that area, plus protecting the whole island from collapsing into the sea.
Yeah.
I get the impression that this whole palm industry is really quite large.
Yeah, it's the largest. About over 57% of the vegetable oil is from palm now.
Is it that much?
Yeah.
Wow.
And Indonesia is one of the biggest producers.
It's the largest
producer of palm oil.
I think the total in the world is close to 100 and some million tons a year of palm oil, and Indonesia is about 35% of that, something like that.
Okay. Now you told me also about two other things that went into this mix, the biomass mix. One of which was it called a candle nut? Yeah.
No, actually, we're combing the countryside for all kinds of biomass fuels,
right.
And we're looking, using, this readily available large scale to produce to develop local alternatives. One of them is called the candle nut, known in Hawaii as the kukui. It's a wonderful tree that produces these large nuts, of which about 73% is a very high calorific shell. And that 73% provides a remarkable, it's actually better than coal, burns cleanly, higher calorific content, and
and
produces 50 times the jobs per capita because it's all shelled by hand. So, so it's actually a wonderful crop, but there isn't one answer.
Well, the other one that struck me, and this was one that I really liked, was the thing that you were telling me about damaged fruit.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that you could actually pay as much for damaged fruit as the people were paying for the good fruit who were buying that.
We're paying a premium for rotten fruit. Strange fruit. But as usual, there's waste in all systems and supply chains. And what we've done is plug some of these holes by discovering that you can actually capture this and incentivize people to pick it up, to collect it, to distribute it. And so now we've built about 6 mills that can just basically process rotten fruit and turn it into a biofuel feedstock.
As opposed to letting it stay in the fruit that's going to market
If it stays in the fruit going to market, it degrades the oil, and actually it produces an oil that's non-food grade. It cannot be consumed by human beings.
So the fruit that we're talking about is palm?
It's palm fruit, yeah.
Okay. But what happens here is the choice is either let people sneak this stuff in so that it goes to market, degrades the market materials, or pay them extra to give you the rotten fruit so that you so that you can take it to market as a different product.
As a different product that is actually, first of all, we have the 4 key principles in our whole bioenergy, biofuels. One of them is no food grade materials are used, or food versus fuel is not a problem.
Yes.
And the second is we utilize existing technologies and supply chains. We don't concoct some exotic and expensive new kind of contraptions, but we utilize the existing infrastructure to produce a product of value. And then, another is we don't get involved in conversion or destruction of, fragile ecosystems, forests, and the like. And then the fourth is that we verify and validate that through internationally recognized certification.
Okay.
Because otherwise we could be making all sorts of preposterous or genuine claims, and there's no way to, to validate it.
So you got third-party oversight.
We have third-party with we use the European standard. The U.S. standard is actually quite murky. The U.S. is the EPA standard, and they actually, I believe, they grandfather in a lot, and they accept a lot of things that I would consider less viable, less valid. So we work with the RED, the Renewable Energy Directive of the EU, the European Union, to validate the process, which means it's a big hassle, and it requires a great deal of transparency and trust, and traceability. Unless you have that in place, it's not credible.
Yes. Well, I think the idea of going out and saying, I'm going to pay you for rotten fruit more than you're paid for good fruit, and then I'm going to take this to market in a form that saves the world, sounds pretty incredible. It needs a certain amount of validation.
Well, I invite you to...
There's a good secondary market of turning good fruit into bad fruit.
But as soon as that happens, the price of the good fruit goes up.
Yeah.
So as long as it's within a certain range, I'm sure they're not going to do that.
To actually try to explain it a little bit, because I'm sure it sounds incredulous, but basically the waste fruit, what we're after is oil. We're not after a food grade oil, we're after oil. And the fruit, when the fruit is removed from the bunch, it's actually has a much higher yield of oil. The yield of oil is over 30%.
Okay.
If you keep it in the bunch, it's only around 20, 21.
Aha! So you're paying for something which may not be good for the market that existed, but it's got a higher content of oil.
Which is what we're after.
Which is what you're after.
We're actually after calorific
I'm starting to
content.
believe you.
So what exactly is the nature of this fruit? Would it be something you'd see in a local store?
No, this is palm fruit, Tom.
Palm. Okay, palm.
Date palms, coconut palms?
No, it's oil palm. The Elaeus guianensis is the botanical name.
Take your word for it.
If I pronounce it correctly. Oil palm, the African oil palm, it's called. It came from West Africa, where all the Ebola is occurring now. But the African oil palm, it's actually only been on the market for about 100 years. And it's sort of took off coincidentally when fossil fuel prices shot up, and somebody figured out that you could produce biodiesel from palm oil. And so actually about 30% of oil palm in the world, palm oil, is converted into biodiesel, biofuel.
Okay. Do you happen to know offhand how much a gallon of palm oil is worth for human consumption?
I can't think of gallons, but I could tell you what the metric ton or the a metric ton or a cubic meter of it. It's basically right now selling. It's actually the price has been declining. It's in the $600 per ton, so that's 60 cents a liter. So
Which 60 cents a liter in very rough terms we could call $2.40, a little bit less than that.
A gallon, yeah.
Per gallon.
Right.
So we're talking about a price.
That's not cheap.
It's not cheap, but it's also, compared to diesel oil, not expensive.
And we're selling our product. It comes in at a 25% discount to palm. So we're in at whatever that is, $1.80.
$1.80 a gallon.
Yep.
And what's a barrel of oil? It's 35 gallons, isn't it? I think it's 35.
55.
No, that's a 55.
No, that's right. Yeah, it is.
It's 35
yeah.
35. So
the gallon that I saw today is hovering around $3. So
right, and what that means is you're talking about oil going to market at about $63 a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
So this is cheaper oil.
Yeah.
Than now. Admittedly, in order to be used in a diesel engine, it might need some kind of chemical conversion.
Yeah, the product needs to be esterified.
Okay.
And trans-esterified.
Right.
First, you need to knock out the fatty acids, and then you have to convert what is now a combination of triglycerides, mainly triglycerides, converted into methyl ester and glycerol.
And my bet is that Tom Fennell knows all about that. Do you,
I have a
Tom?
diesel car.
Right. So
And-
it's the methyl ester, which is biodiesel.
Right. And you have experience with conversion of restaurant waste into diesel oil.
Well, I just run filtered restaurant waste.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't turn it into biodiesel.
Right.
Right.
But you have done that in the past, haven't you?
I haven't, but I'm familiar with the process.
Restaurant waste is still at a fairly low free fatty acid. It's probably at around 4 or 5%, which means that if you have a good preheater, you can keep it viscous, reduce the viscosity enough to keep it flowing and keep your engine running.
I can do that for 6 months of the year.
Yep, you can't do it.
Can't do it in the wintertime.
Right, exactly.
Some friends of mine have converted where they have a separate gas tank that's heated,
Mm.
so they're running warm oil through
Right.
their engine.
Well, you can power diesel stationary engines and boilers and power plants with this product that we produce.
Right. Right. So
It needs very simple, esterification is simply a way to knock down the fatty acids and the viscosity level so
Right.
it can be used in a stationary engine.
right.
I look at it as making soap and then throwing away the soap.
Well, actually, you're absolutely right, because what we have to do is we have to reduce the MIU, that's in the oil. That's moisture, impurities, and unsaponificable compounds.
That's
Okay.
a great word. I'm going to look for a way to use unsaponific.
Meaning that soap, throw away the soap.
I know.
Is exactly what you
absolutely.
said. Exactly. But yeah, the main use of this kind of product historically has been in soap and detergents, but low grade, stuff.
So basically, what we've got here is the palm oil industry has got a whole lot of waste.
Yeah.
Different kinds of waste, but a whole lot of waste. And was the thing that you were talking about, Echo Peat, was that?
No, that was with coconuts.
With
were working
Core?
with Choir, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, but there's a lot of waste here, is what it boils
Yeah.
down to. And I think it reminds me of the people in South America who were throwing so much stuff into the rivers.
Somebody
the rivers
told
were
me
getting
before,
choked.
don't preach to the choir.
Yes. Well, we're preaching to the televisions.
That was a pun, but it was
Yes.
obviously not caught.
It was not caught. That's absolutely correct. It was not caught. Don't preach to the choir. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, anybody who can figure that out, you win an award. You can apply for it in the mail to me, and the award consists of congratulations and no physical object. But yeah, And so you've got
actually, we've kind of taken it one final step, which is the life cycle of the palm tree is about 25 years.
Okay.
They actually can grow 100 years, but at about age 20, they start declining in productivity, and then they start going down, pretty drastically. And at age 25, typically the trees have to be felled and usually and replanted and start the cycle over again. What we are working on now is to take those trees and turn them into the main fuel for a power plant.
Okay.
For a 10 megawatt power plant that can, in the location, produce enough power for about 20,000 people.
Right, right. Now, one thing I know Tori would say, but wait a minute, you're taking stuff out of the soil. Are you putting it back?
Right now, the way, first, it's a good point. Right now, what they do is they chip it up, and it degrades very poorly. It actually locks up nutrients. It doesn't effectively recycle nutrients. So the best actual practice, or the SOP, and the best practice is to plant leguminous cover crops that are then turned into the soil as green manures.
Okay.
And that actually has a better nutrient capture and transfer. And then you use other biomass. You don't burn it all. You essentially create, for instance, the other thing is the empty fruit bunch, which you've got the rotten fruit and the empty fruit bunch once you've stripped it. The empty fruit bunch can be produce biogas, methane, and it can produce fertilizer.
Fertilizer, yes.
So no, we look at it holistically.
Right.
We don't just.
I understand. One more question about this. You burn the trunks; they're burned to ash.
Yeah.
Do you capture the ash and use it?
The biochar, of course. The
Well,
ash and the biochar.
The biochar is going back to the soil.
Yes.
But the ash, the actual wood ash.
It can be used as a fertilizer.
Okay.
No,
so
no,
you
the
see,
whole
that would
point is-
satisfy her.
Right.
And she's got a really kind of remarkable way of looking at a system and saying, well, wait a
Well, there
minute.
is no quick fix, and there's no 100% solution. What this does, though, and what if I could explain a little bit. Right now, there are about 10 million hectares, or 22 million acres,
Right.
in Indonesia dedicated to palm oil production.
Okay.
Half of that is smallholders, people that have basically 2 hectares or 5 acres, and those people have no money to replant. They have no actual means or resources to replant. So they're hanging on to these trees that are drooping and declining. And what we're putting together is a proposal where we take the off the trees, we prepare the soil, we supply them with high quality, high yielding seeds, and get them a bank loan. So that they actually can replant. And the bank loan is for not just the trees, but also the nutrients, the green manure crops.
Okay.
So that they actually end up with probably increasing their yields by 25 to 50% the next generation.
Right. And as I think about biochar being in this mix, I wonder whether the soil isn't actually improving as a result.
I think it is. There are, sorry to belabor this, but there are 2 major problems. That one of them is by chipping and basically sheet composting this residue, this plant matter, you're potentially spreading one of the most pernicious diseases, plant disease plant-borne called Ganoderma, that renders basically the soil sterile after 2 or 3 generations.
Wow.
And the second is there's pests, which when you reincorporate this into the soil, there's specific pest species. One is called the rhinoceros beetle.
I've heard of that.
Imagine, a miniature version of a rhinoceros,
Right.
burrowing and
Right.
actually diminishing the yields. And in fact, so we're eliminating disease and pests, providing a higher yielding crop and promoting a sustainable model.
Right.
You know,
The palm trees that are the oil palm trees are planted how far apart?
they're typically about 6 meters.
Do they have any ground cover under them or something that's grown with them?
The best practice is to grow various kinds of leguminous crops like mucuna, puraria, and so on.
Yeah, I grow those all the time.
Yeah, I know. Just throw them out. No, but basically, I encountered this visionary Dutchman who had promoted this. He called it ecological farming for the tropics, and it's all based on growing these green manures, which will enable you to restore the soil fertility and manage to capture moisture and nutrients, and enable you to plant perennials to do a polycultural type of system. And that's sort of the principle right now, is actually before you plant the trees, you plant the ground cover, and then that ground cover, once you've got the trees are, full canopy that shades out those ground covers, then you plant other types of ferns and other ground covers.
All right. Now, Thomas, what is the name of the business that you've got?
STC, Sustainable Trade and Consulting.
And there's a website for this.
We've got a website, stcresources.com.
Okay, so a person could go there and find out about it.
And to their heart's content, yeah.
Yes. I went there and found all kinds of things that I was going to bring up to your dismay, but unfortunately I wasn't able to find any.
Well, no, actually websites quickly get out of date, and ours
Yes.
is probably 2 years behind all the...
That's understandable, to tell you the truth. You are in the business of identifying things that can be used, and
The consulting means that we are able to tap and scan all these different innovations and opportunities, and then the ones that are most promising, we turn them into a viable business. And that was something that I learned to my dismay in my previous business. The startup costs of doing things properly, of doing all the groundwork to be able to promote sustainability, to have certification and all that, are very expensive. And we're able to tap money from the US, the Finnish, the Dutch, the UK, Norwegian governments to do this type of resource scanning, and then to create the basis for businesses that can be viable.
that's interesting.
And these are all locally owned businesses, I presume.
We work with traditional community-based businesses and micro enterprises, but our company is a Indonesian company. That is, but it's a foreign exchange company.
And you are, one of the things that you said to me in our meeting was that you were interested in ties with Vermont.
Well, yeah, I think Vermont is such a backwoods inventors and innovators.
Boy, are there ever backwoods inventors and innovators in Vermont?
No, I'd love to invite as many backwood inventors to come to Bali and help us out, basically.
Can I come to Bali?
You're already
I
slotted.
need to have my way paid. I don't have any income to speak of.
No, there are. I mean, I actually have a couple of friends that fit that profile perfectly. But I think, especially reading opening up the Reformer, my first moment of a re-entry, that the nuclear power plant is paying for converting schools and to biomass. I mean, that's never in my dreams did I expect that.
Although there are those of us who say that we wish this could be done in a better way. Biomass, burning biomass, as you know, is a matter of capturing a heat content of the biomass and putting it into the school. And then what is lost? Well, what's lost when you do that is going to be the majority of what you started with.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, and this is something I've been telling people, you should really look into this. You should look into this. You should look into this. General Electric as you know, has a division that is devoted entirely to the question of gasification.
Yeah.
And you can gasify wood.
We're going to be using one of their engines, the Jenbacher.
And that's what I was going to say. There's another division called the Jenbacher, which is an Austrian. Clearly, you know about it, but people who watch on television don't necessarily.
It's owned by GE.
It's owned by GE. It used to be, prior to, and this is I don't know how far back this company goes. It might have
100 some years probably.
I think it goes back to the 15th century maybe, but there was a time when they were making pots and pans, but the previous thing they were making engines for diesel locomotives. So they had all the stuff that they needed to make diesel engines of various sizes, and they make diesel engines that run on gas.
Yep.
I'm not talking about gasoline. I'm talking about natural gas, producer gas, syngas, methane, propane if you want. They're very versatile. And those engines run at an astonishingly high level of efficiency.
The only problem is they're very expensive.
They're not as expensive as a lot of other things, though. And compared to, building a furnace that has a few pipes running from a boiler to the rest of the school, yes, they're expensive. Yeah. But when you consider, if you have a Jenbacher engine, it's going to be running at almost 50% efficiency, just in the production of electricity. Yeah. And the efficiency of production of heat is close to 40%. So you combine the two together and you come up with this 90% figure that they tout at the GE site. But the 40% that you're getting is approximately what you would get out of the wood for burning the wood. So you're getting more energy and electricity than you would be getting if you just burned the wood as a side product.
Right.
And then that energy can be sold. And on top of that, if you use that energy to drive heat pumps, you can get about 4 times as much heat as you do burning the wood. So you can operate at an extremely high efficiency with these things. And that is important. And also important is the fact that you can gasify the wood one day and use it the following week. Right. You don't have to use it immediately.
Right. No. I mean, we're working with Jenbacher on this project with the trunks.
Yes.
Because the other Chinese and Indian engines, they claim 6,000-7,000 hours per year, and when you really look at it, the track record is much worse.
Yes.
Not only is it the lower efficiency and energy capture, but it's also that there are a lot of drawbacks and bugs within those designs. Mm-hmm. The Chinese, who knows, the current ones probably have a useful life of 2 or 3 years, but then they cost about a fourth of a Jenbacher.
Yes, well, the Jenbacher would have a life of what, though, by comparison?
I would think 20 or 30.
Yeah, which means ultimately, just on the basis of the life expectancy, the cheap engines cost twice as much or more. So
actually, I was just impressed with the symbolic significance of a nuke, financing sustainable energy. But I really appreciate your and both of your way of, getting us to understand and not see any single solution as the answer, but to see it as
actually, do you know Alex Wilson?
Of course.
Okay, Alex Wilson is working on the what is that called? The Reliant.
I know we talked about him last week. But
I wish I could remember the name of it. Reliant Design Institute. He's starting up in Brattleboro.
Boy, if you're not there, you're close.
Okay. Well, he's talking about microgrids as well.
Right.
And I've been trying to push microgrids and things like that in Brattleboro for probably 4 years now. And
you probably have one in your backyard, so
it wouldn't surprise me. If we don't have one, I would like to have one in the house that I'm in. But these are things that I think can save people a lot of money. They can make us into prosumers instead of consumers. They can, I point out to people that in Brattleboro we're spending $25 million a year on electricity. This community it's just leaving the. This is and on top of that we're spending money for heat, which is in addition another $25 million a year, and then on top of that we're spending money for transportation, and on top of that, we're spending money on food that we don't need to spend because the food can be more economically produced and to be better for us too, and probably taste better and be fresher and be, we can have a better world. Let me put it that way. And so Alex Wilson's Reliant Design Institute.
Back to the little vegetarian thing, I'm about to meet with the largest biodiesel company in the U.S. that's also incidentally supplying a lot of homes in the New England with a biofuel heating oil.
Okay.
And which is
sort of largest.
Yeah, the largest producer, renewable energy group, based in Iowa. And they're interested in our rotten fruit.
Rotten fruit for a premium. Yeah. High quality rotten fruit.
And but right now, 90% of their feedstock is basically rendered animal fat. And they actually have, I think, 10 rendering plants all over the country where they capture and convert this animal waste into biofuel. Mm-hmm. And so now we're about to infiltrate them with vegetarian alternatives, with our rotten fruit.
This we could actually get into this a little bit because one of the things that friends of mine at various times in my life have been trying to press me to be a vegetarian, and I've always resisted that for various reasons. And one of the thoughts that comes into my mind is, I was actually thinking about it, and I came across a headline that said 50,000 deer were killed last year by automobiles in the state of Pennsylvania. And wow. the number of deer that we've got is absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
But it's because we've altered the environment. We've got 5 times as many deer as there were before Europeans got to North America. And if you don't do something about that number, which is currently being done by allowing people to hunt them, they starve, they die of diseases, they don't live very comfortable lives, and really, killing the deer, having a hunter who's tolerably well trained for this kind of thing, having him kill them is probably ending their lives in one of the most, let me say, graceful ways.
And reducing the vectors for Lyme disease on top.
Well, yeah. On the other hand, I have to face a number of facts that are kind of uncomfortable for a meat eater. And one of them is, and this is something that was brought home to me by the aquaponic thing that Tori Weekers and I are doing, the amount of food that goes into raising the animals that are having their fat rendered into biodiesel is astonishing. And I find it difficult to imagine that biodiesel is really all that good for the environment under the circumstances.
Well, of course they didn't. The reason that biodiesel has taken off is because they're able to capture all that waste.
Again, it's waste. But if you were to buy diesel oil, use it in your equipment to raise farm animals, to produce fat, to render, to make biodiesel, you'd lose money like that.
Well, yeah, to produce waste, that's not your goal.
That's not your goal. But the thing is, the amount of the feed to feed to. There's a ratio that's used where you talk about the amount of feed that you feed the animal to the amount of meat that you get from the animal, and the ratio with cattle is about 40 to 1. You have to produce a ton of vegetarian food, which
except range fed, of course.
Except range fed, you have to produce a ton of food for those 40 tons of food for those animals to get a ton of beef. Where if you're doing it with various fish, for example, tilapia or the native brown bullhead is a good species. You're talking about 1.5 pounds of feed producing 1 pound of fish. And that feed
That's
can
a
be
much better ratio.
Oh yeah, and the feed can be duckweed. Who eats duckweed?
Ducks.
That's right. It can be mosquito larvae. Who eats mosquito larvae? More of us, I wish. It could be a lot of other things. One of the really great feeds for that is black soldier flies that you can have in your compost bin.
Right.
There are lots of ways to feed fish, and that is the equivalent of range fed. But the point that I'm making is that I am tending toward a vegetarian diet now because I believe that it's much better for the environment to do that. And so I eat less meat than I used to.
Well, Diet for a Small Planet made that point many years ago.
Many years ago. And
Chris Hedges wrote an article last week on exactly that point. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It's the figures. If his figures are right, they're very scary.
Well, the figures are scary for beef. They really are scary for beef, unless it's range fed, and the cattle are allowed just to kind of wander around and in an area that would otherwise not be used. And such areas actually do exist, but not in the amounts that we're dedicating land to growing corn. And of course that also, we grow corn to use it to make ethanol to drive cars, and that I think is not.
Yeah, that's political.
It's political. It's not good for the environment.
That's not a economically sound practice at all.
It's not an environmentally sound practice
it's
either.
not
We're actually going to be making charcoal briquettes out of corn cobs, but
okay.
I would not because we don't do food versus fuel, therefore we wouldn't be involved in ethanol.
Well, people don't eat the corn cobs.
Well, the corn cobs are waste.
Yeah.
This is again,
Exactly.
it's a matter of utilizing waste. And if we utilized the waste, we'd have a lot more than we do. I don't know what percentage of our food winds up being waste, but a lot more than half of it.
Significant.
Yeah, a lot more than half. It's half in India, where they've got a desperate problem with feeding people. Half their food winds up
And
being
half their
waste.
food is waste.
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of that because they've got an unreliable electric supply.
Yeah.
And
So
so
they
they
can't
can't run
preserve it.
refrigerators. These are crazy systems that we've got. Again, if you go back to the pepperoni and the soppressata, you don't cook it, so you don't use power doing that. You don't have to refrigerate it either, so you don't need power for that. And there are a lot of, and this reminds me, before you came, there was a question that I was going to ask you. I don't know what the physical conditions are like in Indonesia relative to the problems of absorption cycle cooling. But I wonder whether the waste heat from a Jenbacher engine could be used to run refrigerating equipment.
Absolutely, but it's interesting how like heat capture and cogeneration and so on is not practiced at all. There and a lot of that is because of the disparity of wealth and power, and that it's very prestigious to have a large building, and very little concern is given to energy efficiency. It's all superficial appearance and prestige.
Right.
And so there's a lot of room there.
Right. I got my 14th edition of the Solar Living Source book yesterday in the mail. And I had always called it in the early days the Real Goods catalog because they actually sold things in that. They don't anymore.
It was Real Goods then, I guess.
It was, yeah.
The Whole Earth catalog.
And one of the things that they sold in there was a piece of equipment called an Isaac. The name was Isaac, but I don't remember the name of the. But it was a company that made absorption cycle ammonia-based refrigerating equipment, and they did it by using solar power. And of course, this equipment is funny because it has no moving parts. You describe it, and it's just like, what? And it took me a while going through a description of how the process worked, really to understand it, because it uses some physics that are a little bit out there. It was known 100 years ago, but it's a little bit out there.
I think that's the icy ball. I think that's which is counterintuitive, but it works.
Yeah, and these things were for sale in the old Real Goods catalog for something like $7,000. They'd have to be custom built from scratch. It would take you 6 months to get it, but they actually sold these things. And I looked up, when I was thinking about this, because the Real Goods catalog, or the Solar Living Source Book, was coming, and I looked it up to see if the company was still there, and it is. And they make little units that are, a $7,000 commercial unit is not big. And what they do is they spend the day absorbing energy from the sun, moving the ammonia around, and then at night, when it cools off, they release that energy and turn a large amount of water into ice. And this was being sold to, as I think about it, one of the places tells me it would be perfect for Indonesia, Thailand. They were sold in Thailand. They were being sold in I think, British Columbia. And they were being sold in seacoast towns that had no power, where there were fishermen, because the fishermen could preserve their fish using the ice. And the ice was being produced at no fuel cost. Once you've paid off the plant, it's this thing the word I was searching for earlier in the news broadcast was marginal costs. Mm-hmm. The marginal cost is approaching zero.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, like solar, like wind, the marginal cost of cooling is approaching zero. And you could use these things for air conditioning and stuff like that. They're really brilliant stuff out there.
I started my career out there in appropriate technology with what many people thought was a perpetual motion machine,
Yes.
which was a hydraulic ram.
Oh yes, lovely machines, except they're noisy.
Well, yeah, you don't want to have your house next to one, but yeah, it does have about 30 or 50 beats and bangs every minute, but it's able to pump water remarkably 10 times the fall.
Yes.
You can pump and deliver.
Yes.
And we were able to get to make it out of pipe parts, and
that's very cool.
The first one I saw was in a Shinto shrine in northern Japan, and the monks pointed out to me the noise factor is there, but somehow they managed to continue their meditation daily. But it's remarkable to be able to see something actually invented in rural America and rural Japan in the 19th century. That has such resilience and such,
and I think one moving part.
Efficiency. One moving part, yeah. It's water, actually, simply water.
Well, you've got a valve. You've got
water
a valve.
and a valve,
yeah,
essentially.
And just with a valve, you've got your pump.
And you can convert that into power, for that matter.
Yeah.
You can tie it in, actually, formerly you had to waste about 10 times the water waste. I mean, you couldn't get the benefit because you would be pumping about 10%. But you could actually take that water there and use it to create micro hydropower.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because you'd still have a fall, and you'd be able to generate electricity.
Well, I can see that we have. Do you know what time we started this segment?
Very close to 11.
Yeah, I think we've gone over an hour. But we're going to have to say goodbye to everybody, I'm afraid, because we've got our hour up. So I will say goodbye. I'm George Harvey, and
I'm Tom Fennell.
Tom Fennell.
Say goodbye.
Thomas Fricke.
And we will all hope to see you again soon. We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well on the day that we die.